Hello, my name is Alicia Shapiro with AInews.com, and welcome to another episode of our Driving Tomorrow Conversations with Industry Leaders, where we explore the real world impact of artificial intelligence across industries. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Lolita Taub, General Partner at Ganas Ventures. She's an entrepreneur, ecosystem builder, and the author of the upcoming book, What Actually Matters: Startups, Capital, and the Rules Nobody Taught Us. Throughout her career, she's worked with and invested in more than 100 startups, giving her a rare perspective from nearly every angle of the startup ecosystem as a founder, operator, investor, and advisor. With AI making it faster and easier than ever to launch companies and build products, founders have more opportunities than ever, but they also face more noise, more competition, and more pressure to know what truly matters to investors. So today we're going to talk about the lessons founders wish they had learned sooner, how AI is changing the startup landscape, what investors are really looking for, and the decisions that compound into successful companies over time. Thank you, Lolita, for joining me today.
And thank you so much, Alicia. And that was a wonderful introduction. I should bring you
Okay.
along with me
All
everywhere
right.
I
Sure.
go.
Well, let's start with the book. It's coming out in September, and you said that this book is something that you wished you had when you were starting out. So, looking back, what was missing that no one was really telling founders or investors?
Yeah, I think when you're a business person in general, an entrepreneur, or you're figuring out life in general, what I want to be when I grow up,
Mhm.
sometimes you don't know the questions to ask. You
Yeah.
don't know what to look for. You're like the blind leading the blind situation going on. And so the biggest thing that I was missing from day one was orientation. I did not come from the world of tech, venture capital, startups. That is not the business that my family knew. My family came from very humble beginnings and had a small business that they ran. And so entrepreneurship was something that I did see, but not in the scale of Silicon Valley startups and venture capital. And so for me, it's been so wonderful, the privilege and the honor to be able to experience all of these different roles, as you mentioned, as founder, angel, general partner at a fund that invests in startups, investing in other funds as an LP and an ecosystem builder, community builder, right? And so for me, it's so much about, can I have a map? And can I have the language? And can I have the information I don't even know how to ask for? That's the book I wrote. And being able to understand every different role is so helpful in also understanding the ecosystem because everyone
Yeah.
plays a role.
Yeah.
And it can be SMBs because most startups are actually just small businesses that decide, hey, let's go into raising venture capital, which is not the right thing for most companies. So actually, Alicia, you might be surprised, but I actually tell founders, like, let's look at alternative funding
Wow.
strategies. And I actually mentioned that in the book, but I'll keep it to that, basically orientation and a map that I could use to navigate because I didn't come from a world that taught us all these rules.
And I imagine as a startup or a small business, like you said, you don't know the questions you don't know to ask. So
Yeah.
sometimes founders do blame themselves when it's just really navigating a system that wasn't designed to explain itself very fully anyway. So that's really fascinating.
Yeah, and actually, great point. So, really, the through line of the book is keeping in mind the access tax, what I call the access tax. And this is the additional labor, additional energy, whether it be emotional or relationship building, this learning curve that we have to deal with. And if we don't understand how the system works, how to navigate it, the map, a lot of the time we actually take on the emotional tax of saying, oh, there's something wrong with me. I don't know something. But oftentimes, yes, we all can grow and we're always in beta. We should always be trying to figure things out and continue to develop ourselves. But oftentimes, it's easy to say it's my fault if you don't understand everything else. But a lot of the time, the answer is not that. It's
Mhm.
the system that nobody taught us. And here I am sharing everything I've learned the hard way.
That's
And
aw-
over my almost 20 years of working in tech and then in big tech startups and
that's awesome. I'm so glad that you are sharing this information because it does seem like a foggy field that you're navigating and you don't have a map. So it's very nice of you to give us a peek into what is going on. You mentioned that you have different roles. You've been the
Mhm.
founder, the investor, the ecosystem builder with communities. That gives you a front row seat for the startup world. So when you look across all of those experiences, what do you think people consistently maybe misunderstood about building startups that would maybe help them get a better foundation?
I think one of the things that I see the in between the lines is there's really excited founders who want to raise venture capital and be on the front page of TechCrunch or any Crunchbase or any kind of really publisher, right? A magazine or
Yeah.
newsletter, etc. And there's this like, wow, this person raised so many millions and this and that. And I feel that the one of the areas where founders can fall through the cracks is feeling like that is actually the goal to get on these features, to be featured, to raise all this capital, and forget that actually, no, we're building a business to make money. The goal isn't raising successfully, building a business successfully. And what does that take? Does it take venture capital? Does it not? And I think that's one of the issues and challenges that some founders, first time founders have. And the reality is, no, it's not all that complicated. It sounds like this illustrious world and yes, nobody talks about it, but if we make it just accessible, which that is my huge goal in this
Mhm.
book, what actually matters, it's not that difficult. And at the end of the day, it just boils down to what are you trying to do and what does it take? And reduce all the noise and pay attention to the signal. And that is something that we all need to do, especially in this world that has so much going on, so much information, misinformation, good information. And now with AI being able to produce so much content and slop and all these
Mhm.
things, right? It's gotten easier to do so many things that you can really get lost and you need to come back to, okay, what am I actually trying to do? What's the best route of going about doing that? And then in the world of AI, I would start to say being an AI company isn't the goal either. It's again going down and to the basics. We are solving problems for XYZ, and we're doing it in this way that's differentiated from the alternative. And that's why we're the people to build this or to sell this solution or give you the solution or product to you, Mr. or Mrs. Customer.
Yeah.
And that gets lost. So I just want to say, like, to any business person listening to this, we just need to come back, take a step back, take away the noise, maybe do some meditation to take away the noise, and not be on our phones scrolling, and think, what is our goal? And what's the lowest lift, highest impact way of getting there?
I love that you said that because it seems like you said, AI is just making things faster. It's producing these huge numbers of fundraising that these large enterprise AI companies are getting. Maybe startups feel a little FOMO, like they wish they could get that much money or whatever. But it really is important to just realize you have this business for a reason and you're trying to solve a problem. And maybe that's the advice that's stayed the same through this
Yes,
AI movement.
really, Alicia, I cannot tell you how much I feel like we just go into La La Land and oh, this AI company, this other one. And unless you have an LLM like Anthropic
Yeah.
or so on and so forth, and you're raising billions of dollars, creating an actual AI company is a different beast altogether, like a true AI company, and on a infrastructural kind of way. But I'll flip it to during the time period where SaaS was a big thing and it was the big new thing, and everyone's like, oh, will companies actually adopt it or do they want to stay in-house for our enterprise friends and that are listening in, right? And then everyone was like, oh, every company is a SaaS company, every company is a software company. And to me, every company will be or already is becoming an AI company. And if you don't leverage the tools to help you keep your edge, then it's going to be really hard to keep up with the market and continue to grow. But it's different to leverage AI and just tech in general, because
Yeah.
maybe you don't even need to leverage AI for whatever you're working on.
Mhm.
It's just, what do you need to solve the problem that your business is solving
Yeah.
for? And maybe this AI stuff is just more an operational support, right? Streamlining things, creating skills, repeatable things, and looking at AI as employees, but not necessarily this is an AI company. We need,
Yeah.
that's the goal. Again, let's not chase the shiny object. I know it can get really exciting and distracting, but no, actually, you strip everything down and we're back to the basics. Are
Yeah.
you solving a problem in a big market? Are people willing to pay for it? And what's your edge?
And it's hard not to get distracted by those shiny objects because
Yeah,
you do compare yourself and your company, and you're like, why did they get so much money? Or why are they so successful? And
yeah.
it's really, you do have to stay focused, and that can be hard. What's something that maybe AI founders seem to believe about fundraising that you think maybe isn't true?
A lot of time, first time founders will assume that if someone carries the title of investor, that they are a good target to pitch. And it's so important to do your homework. And really, it's a sales strategy you have to take on. Have a CRM, have a targeted customer as your investor you're going to raise from. Make sure that they match what you're building, that they are investing in your industry, in your state, with the checks and the geography, with your corporate structure, all these different things, because it's not standardized. So making
Mhm.
sure that you're spending the time on the right investors is really important. So that's definitely something that I think I see founders get wrong. Sometimes I get pitched like, Lolita, do you want to invest in a movie? And that's totally outside my. If you look at Ganas Ventures, we invest in seed community driven companies in the US and LATAM and no physical products. And I cannot tell you how many pitches every single day I get that say, that they are physical product, and they're wasting time. And I think what you don't understand as a founder is that when you do reach out, you may be put into spam boxes because it's, you might be spraying and praying, as some may say,
Yeah.
and trying to see who will stick. But if you take the time to do your homework and really prepare, it will be a lot easier to fundraise. And also to know, maybe you start and you learn something and you're like, you know what, I'm going to just hold off because this is taking way too much time. Because that's another
Yeah.
thing founders don't know and business people don't know. Fundraising can become its own full-time job and it
Right.
takes you away from building. And so I love seeing founders that have this moment of stepping back and saying, you know what, I'm just going to go back to building because we can, and we're going to make our customers money, right? What we sell, our customers be our capital, and that's really important. And the last thing I would say, especially in the world of AI and very core to our thesis at Ganas Ventures, is community. AI has made everything faster, but if anything, it's made being human, creating trust,
Yeah.
authenticity, this connection that much more important. That's why you see different brands even showing how they're filming their advertisements so that you know that they're not using AI, right? So there's this capital really compounds with community.
Mm.
And so being able to really connect with your customer, these are very rudimentary, but it's just an approach, right? When you think about community being what produces revenue, what can give you operational support. If you have a community, if you think of your customers as community, if you draw from them, they will be the best talent, for example, to bring on your team because they know what you're about, they believe in it, there's more of the stickiness. And then insight, as you're developing your business, your community that you're serving, your customers, really, they're going to give you feedback, but you need to make the space for that. And none of these things, for now anyway, AI can do. We're still selling to people. It's still a people to people world
Yeah.
with AI in the mix. Who knows for how long, but we're still there. And our differentiation is that
Yeah.
humans and community.
I think that is such great advice because even though AI has changed maybe how we work and how we get our information, the advice is still the same. You growing your company for a reason to solve a problem. And even though AI is making things faster and maybe a little better, you still got to have your same foundation. And that's such great advice. I love that.
Yeah, and you know what? And also, I think it's been funny. I'm sure so many of your community and even you have seen all these companies say, okay, we're going to fire all these people, replace
Yeah.
it with AI, and then we're going to make more money. And then you realize actually you need people to manage the AI. And it's
Yep.
more of a collaboration than a full replacement because guess what? You need the human to actually be able to critically think and understand
Yes.
what's priority, what do we need to do, the feedback, the lived experiences, the expertise that we may have, or the angle, because we need to drive it, we need to mold it. And it's not one of those things where it's like you get it off the shelf and you install it and it runs forever. You have to always be tinkering.
Yeah.
And so you need us humans. Yes,
Hmm.
humans are awesome.
Yes, that's right. I always do laugh at when I hear companies, they're like, oh, we laid off all these people. And then the next week, oh, we hired 500 people back because we realized that was a mistake.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Makes me laugh. Out of curiosity, how are you using AI in your day-to-day work as an investor?
Yeah, honestly, I couldn't be a solo GP, a solo fund manager without leveraging technology.
Yeah.
So my tech stack has a lot of AI technology and I'll share it. But it also, I want to point this out because I feel like we get carried away and there's so much fun when it's like everything is AI. And
Yeah.
no, that's not the case. You don't need that for everything. Sometimes it's just programs. So, for example, we have this platform called the Startup Investor Matching Tool that
Hmm.
literally matches founders and investors and to make introductions. And this was built in the time of George Floyd and people saying there's no pipeline. There's for women founders, or LGBTQ, or people call it. Anyway, I built this because I was like, there is not a pipeline problem. There's so many. It's just you're not connecting with them. So we created
Right.
this platform. Anyway, in the back end, it's just based on Google scripts.
Oh,
And so it's a
wow.
program. It's really hands off. I send out introductions, but everything's just like the investor submits a form with all their information and their thesis. The founder shares their information. And this is a great way because founders have a really hard time meeting or accessing investors, especially if you came
Yeah.
from a humble background like myself and started from scratch and didn't have this inherited network. And by the way, that is a core differentiation of the book, what actually matters, that we're part of the 99%. We're not talking about your trust fund baby and you have all
Right.
of this all set up. So the stack to get to the juicy bits, it's I use granola so to take notes and that's been so helpful. I feed that into whatever projects I may have, whether it's for startups or for LP fund management, or maybe it's even for my newsletter project in Claude.
Mm.
So I'm using Claude Chat on my phone, which I think Claude Cowork is coming to your phone too. I'm
I
so
heard that.
excited.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm excited. But everything I have created, so I use Claude Chat and Cowork just because there's more guardrails than in Claude Code.
Mhm.
And but at some point I want to get there. So
Mhm.
that's the biggest engine. And I've created what's called Lolita OS. It
Nice.
actually straddles both professional and personal. And I've created an infrastructure so that there's a kind of persistent memory. And so whenever I'm doing anything, the system in itself remembers everything it needs to. And I've spent a lot of time creating the right skills, the right template, all these kinds of different things. But again, every time we have to just fiddle around with it to tinker and get it to the right place. So granola, as I mentioned, Claude. I use Perplexity for research. I use Gemini for anything Google related. We use, in terms of top of funnel, right? So we do deal flow, selection, or due diligence, and then we invest. And there's a whole, like, there's a lot of zaps, if you will, or triggers, automations that happen for anything that would be repeatable and it does not take any kind of critical thinking. Those have all been automated and not necessarily with AI, but we do use Notion and Airtable and Typeform, and all of these companies have started to integrate AI.
Yeah.
For marketing, any kind of graphics, we use Canva, Claude interaction. it works maybe.
Yeah.
Then I also use Whisperflow, which is also an AI tool. And Whisperflow, for those that may not know about it, is really helpful for just speaking instead of typing.
Mm.
And if you live in front of a computer, which I'm assuming so many of you do, you start dealing with things like arthritis, carpal tunnel, and all of this. And so using Whisperflow has been so great. And
Nice.
also, it has a functionality. It's really great at transcription,
Mhm.
first off, but it also cleans up your language. So if you're writing an email,
Oh,
it will bullet point things. If you said something like, let's do a meeting at 1, and then you're like, no, no, 4 p.m., it will actually just say, let's do a meeting at 4 p.m.
oh,
It will
nice.
correct. And then there's a really cool function of it where you can create what they call snippets. And so if you say a certain phrase, it'll trigger an entire whatever prompt or whatever, which I use on LLMs. So anyway, I can keep talking about technology and I'm just top of my desktop and I'm like, what else do I use?
Yeah.
Because you use so much. And inside of even the G Suite, there's so much to
Yeah.
be used and to play around with even within the docs, within the sheets AI. And so just tinkering. But the importance, I think, is what are the, because again, you can get all excited and go down all these rabbit holes, coming back to what is our goal?
Yes.
And what are the big things that are going to make the biggest difference, right? So I always think about what is lowest lift and highest impact. Anything that's critical thinking, that's going to be human. Anything that's just repeatable things that are not going to change, that you can automate with technology, but otherwise we strip that away. So we have to take it down even one more level. If founders submit to us, they go through a form. The form is just a form on Airtable type form, and it'll actually tell you if we're not a fit on
Mm.
basic criteria. So we don't want to waste anybody's time on our end or on the founder side. After that, we have triggers. We will review companies once we see a potential fit and interest. We just change the tag on the profile in the database of the Airtable. It'll shoot an email to schedule something. Oh, I use Calendly to make sure that it figures all that out. And we're using all the MCPs to connect everything else
Nice.
that we're using. So it's not like a rebuild with all AI tools. It's how do we integrate and are there things that are going to be helpful? And not just let's just add everything that we can use. So, anyway, that's a little bit of a view into how we
Well,
use
it's
technology.
important though that people do realize you don't need a lot of AI. Like you said, you just maybe need some automation that you can connect a couple of programs to that makes your workflow a little easier. You don't need to implement these huge AI programs. So I think that's very important for startups, especially.
For sure, for sure. And just knowing which ones work for you, right? So
Yes.
for me, Claude is the core. But of course, we all use Notion, Google, Zoom, and even Zoom has AI functionality now.
Yeah.
So again, going back to that, are we talking about AI companies versus non-AI companies? Most of the time we're talking about everyone's an AI company or will be.
Yeah. That's an interesting perspective because that made me think, do investors evaluate AI startups differently because they're AI, or is it still the same principles, whether it's an AI company or not?
That's a really good question. So again, if you are purely investing in an AI infrastructure, for example, I do believe that that only does AI, right? That could be a particular case where you're just looking at that. And so there is an additional due diligence arm to that. So making sure that, for example, when you say you have an AI company in general, does anyone on the team know or have experience in AI? If you're an AI company, a pure AI company, then the co-founder should be extremely technical with an AI background of some sort, right? Computer vision, machine learning, whatever it is. Now, for companies that leverage AI, then the question becomes, is this a wrapper? So if
Oh,
something happens with the underlying LLM that they're using to enable their product or service, what happens to their company?
right.
If it's a wrapper, then it's easier to replicate, right? And we are always thinking about differentiation. So, and the way that we define it at Ganas is, does your company have something that a customer would leave an alternative or a competitor for because you're solving their problem better? Are
Right.
they willing to pay for it? And is it difficult for others to replicate it? Now, with AI, you might think, oh, like, who has the better model? But so much research and the direction of the market is at some point, all the models are kind of going to be at an
Yeah.
equal level. And so it becomes a commodity. So when you think about AI becoming a commodity, then what truly matters is what is that differentiator? And again, for us at Ganas, it's community, it's your customers, it's the humans that we're connecting with because that is difficult to replicate.
Mhm.
But everyone can use the same LLM,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So these are some of the elements that you start to think about. And but you're right, Alicia. You mentioned we're going back to the rudimentary at the end of the day. Is this a business that we believe is going to make millions, right? Can it get to 100 million in annual recurring revenue, a valuation of $1 billion or more? Are they solving an actual problem? Are they dealing with headwinds, tailwinds? And if it's early stage, which we that's the area where we invest in, we want to know why are these the founders, the team to build this company and
Oh,
make it successful versus others, right? And so these are some of the it's a nuance and it depends kind of situation. It
yeah.
depends what quote unquote AI company we're looking at, what stage, what their approach is. Are they AI enabled or are they AI core,
Mhm.
right? Art and a science kind of
Yes.
situation going on.
Yeah. One of the things that's really stood out to me from your book was the difference that you made between a company building momentum or performing momentum. And I just loved that phrase because even in my world, when I was starting out with AI News, we had talked with people and was trying to get their advice of how do you grow a media company? Is it a news company? Is it a media company? What are we? And they would either not tell us or they would have these wild numbers that I immediately became suspicious of.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the performing part. They inflate their numbers to really look good and whatever. And maybe they're not lying per se, but they're just sort of leaving out some information.
They're
So,
doing marketing,
yeah, that's right.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But from your perspective, how do you tell the difference when, as an investor, between an actual company building momentum or just performing momentum?
Yeah. And this has become even increasingly harder with companies that leverage AI and that they sell and pitch themselves as that because there will be companies that will from a performance or vanity metrics perspective, you can say we have all of this wait list or we have all these customers. And honestly, a lot of AI companies have managed to get to millions in revenue within months, maybe
Wow.
less than a month. And how you look at that, you might, as an investor, be like, ooh, they're going to be successful. But what we have to always ask the underlying questions of and get a little deeper and ask how sustainable is this? When are these deals going to renew? Or how do we know that the churn or retention, rather, is going to stay there? And so you need to think about those things. But when I talk about performance versus just doing the work in the
Mhm.
book and in life in general, again, we touched on it a little bit. Sometimes, and there's a reason for it, right? So, getting and being featured or saying, here's our vanity numbers, here, this and that, the lists of Forbes 30 under 30 or any kind of list being featured in a major publication, Wall Street Journal or whatever, it
Mhm.
really creates this halo effect and it gives you this
Mhm.
superpower where people are like, if they were mentioned here, they must know what they're doing. And so there is a reason to approach to some degree that to get your
Mhm.
name out there, to show that there's momentum.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between performance momentum versus the real deal. And the real deal is about that sustainability. And what I see sometimes is that some founders will get so caught up in branding, marketing, being in front of and being published and featured, so much so that becomes their business, their personal like business, right? And the actual business over here is just being talked about, but it's not being built. It's not being focused on. And then it runs out of steam at some point because how much can you talk about something that's and share it without actually at some point proving things? And that's the thing because even if you raise capital from venture capitalists, for example, you might be able to raise at a particular valuation, a particular amount of money, but then when you raise the next round or you go to that, you have to live up to whatever you said. And that's when things break. And so there is the whole notion of marketing is something that we need because we need to get the word out, right? And how do our people, our customers find us is by spreading the word and amplifying. But we need to have the steak, as one of my mentors would say. We can't just have the sizzle. We have to have a steak, like
Yeah.
something substantive, right? And so that's the big thing there. And it can get really exciting, right? If so many people want to talk to you or write about you and it's the first time. But again, it's one of those, what are we trying to do here?
Yeah.
Build a successful business. So what does that require?
Mhm.
Maybe a little bit of that, but it's so important to not live out of a performative approach
Mhm.
in life and more of a strategic, intentional, focused science experiment, which
Yeah.
businesses are, right? You
Yeah.
have a hypothesis, you have your success metrics, the timeline, you check, and then you figure out what you need to change, drop, or restart.
Do you think companies or founders often maybe misunderstand or have a misconception about what investors are looking for? And so they're trying to make it sound better than it is, and really that's not what investors are looking for?
Yeah, I think sometimes founders they're performing. Again, going back to that, they're performing for us in the way that they think they should. But at the end of the day, I think founders and just entrepreneurs in general, you just have to talk about what's going on so that you can get the help you need, whether that be advice, introductions, capital, because that's what's going to get you there, right? If I spend all my time telling you how everything is great, but I don't tell you the things I need help with, like how can I ever grow?
And actually, that just made me think if you are honest and go, this is an area that we're struggling and we'd like to get some help somehow, then maybe
Yeah.
the investor has a connection and they can help in that way. But if you don't say it because you think it's
Yeah.
negative, miss
Same.
out.
But again, I will say I understand why founders feel this way because there's so much conflicting information out there. There's be confident, have a big vision, like throw big numbers around, and then there's the fine line of yes, be ambitious, but be grounded. So you
Yeah.
can say, hey, I'm changing the world this way, but here's where I'm starting.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm seeing. Here are my challenges, but here's kind of that nitty gritty, you get back to the substantive part. And I
Mhm.
think that's the balance. It's again an art and a science, and it just takes time to figure out okay, how can I be confident but not oversell myself
Yeah.
to a degree where I cannot live up to it and then I have to raise the next round at a down round at a lower valuation, but at the same time show that I am ambitious enough to build this massive billion-dollar
Yeah.
company, right? But
Fine
at the
line
same
there.
time, be like, I need your help because I don't know it all. And so I love founders that are like, look, these are my strengths. Here's where I'm at. Here's where all of this fits, right? This is the market. Here's the market opportunity. Here's the problem. Here's how it's being solved. Here's how we're approaching it. Here's our vision of how we're going to change the industry. Here's
Mhm.
where we're starting, our hypothesis. Here's what we've learned so far. And that's how we know that we need to do XYZ from a business operations perspective and from a revenue perspective, but also operations and building the product. And that's why we're raising and we're reverse engineering into our metrics that will help us raise successfully the next round. And this is what we need. Here are our holes. And I'm coming to you, Alicia, because you're an expert in this. And that's why we want you to be part of our team. And we want to go on this journey and we want to get to the end of the rainbow and find the pot of gold together.
Yeah.
And so but it takes time because it's part of, again, that communication, that map, that orientation that allows you to get there because it could be so easy to be like I don't really know anything but I've heard that you should pretend until you make it, and so you're doing all these things because you're doing best, right?
Yeah.
But how nice would it be to just actually feel good where you are grounded, and then you'll still get no's because that's just part of it, part of doing anything really. But you'll be more grounded and know that you're heading in the right direction and be able to suss out what information to take and not to, because at the end of the day, we'll all hear conflicting information. And the thing that makes us the leaders or the bosses in our businesses is making the call of what is noise and what is signal
Mhm.
and what's going to make the difference in our businesses.
Yeah. I love that advice. That's so good. And actually, after investing in more than 100 startups, what's one lesson that founders usually don't appreciate until they've learned it the hard way?
Yeah, this is a really good one. And I have to go back to the
Mhm.
human side of things, and remembering that we're human. Just that simple.
Yeah.
I could tell you all the things that everyone's already heard about, but I think one thing that I don't hear talked about enough is how in the world where you're your own boss, there's no one giving you direction or structure. You have to build that, and you have to be ambitious. And sometimes, if you're in the startup VC world, if you're building a business, you're hustling all the time. And we need to know and remember that we're human
Mhm.
so that we can, whatever we're doing is sustainable, and that we remember. And this has been such a huge learning, even for me in my life, because I have been that hustling human being that was overdoing things and not being sustainable, not really paying attention to being human, that we have limits, needs, so on and so forth, until
Mhm.
my body was like, okay, I'm not going to let you do anything until you listen to me and take care of
Yes.
me. And then as we go through, like Alicia, as we start going through like our changes, whether it's andropause as men or perimenopause, menopause as women, we need to remember, like, at the end of this, we're human first,
Yes.
and we need to make sure that the work serves the life as opposed to the life serving the work. And what I mean
Mhm.
by this is, if your cup is not full, if your health is not there, if you're not in the right place, if you're not having some time to relax, to do nothing, which is so hard for me to do. So
Yeah.
I'm still a work in progress in these areas, but it's so important to try to
Mhm.
have a hobby, to spend time with family, to spend time with friends, because this is part of the reason why like our society is the loneliest it's ever been. Depression is high, anxiety is high, burnout is high, and especially again when we're grinding and we live in hustle culture, it could be so hard
Yeah.
to step back and be like, actually, we're human. And if we're going to do this, we need to look at it like a marathon, not a sprint, because that's what it is. And so maybe there are time periods where you have to over hustle, and it's just, we all have periods, but always keeping in mind that we want to have some sort of baseline where we do things in the most sustainable possible way for ourselves as humans in our one body, in our one life, because sometimes if we ignore things, it could really just escalate to things that could have been prevented and take you out of the game completely.
I love, love, love that you said that because I've also had to learn that lesson the hard way. And
Yeah.
it does. You're trying to grow this business, and there's always something that can be done, right? You're always
That's right.
doing something. And if you don't take that time off, you could work 24/7 and burn yourself
Hmm.
out in a week or two. And then what good are you to the company or whatever? So you've got to pace yourself and you've got to know when to call it. It's
Yeah,
such an
and it's
important
really
skill.
hard, and the world has made it really difficult, right? Because
Yeah.
any platform that wants us engaged has made it like catnip,
Yeah.
catnip for humans. And so it's constantly engaging us, and with AI even more, right? Because if you can do more, you're thinking of all these projects and you're waiting
Yeah.
for it to finish something and you're on to something else and you just keep going and going. And if you have challenges stopping when you start, like myself, some people
Mhm.
have a starting problem. I don't have that. I have a
Yeah.
stopping problem.
Yeah.
It's so hard to detach. And I'm like, just one more thing and then I'll be done. One more thing and I'll be. And that's what happens. And whether it's because you're on one of the LLMs working on different projects, creating different products or whatever, NVPs, which is, I think, a really huge win with AI, is you can create an MVP quite quickly with limited resources and limited time. But again, the dark side of all of this is you get addicted and you
Uh,
can't just unplug. And I have my husband and my fur baby who reminds me that I need to go eat and I need to go
Yes.
walk. And I'm trying to be more proactive and time box time for just not doing anything because all of a sudden I start feeling guilty of not doing something. I'm like, oh my
Yes.
God, why am I not working on the thing? The thing is that it's because society, we live in such hustle culture and we have to evolve that if we want to remain sane
Yes.
and have actual longevity where you have quality of life, not just living long and having a horrible time in your
Yeah.
body and mind.
Yeah, exactly. You got to take care of yourself first. I always come back to the airplane example where you got to put your oxygen mask on yourself before you can put it on your kid or whatever. And in your head, you're like, no, I got to save my kid first.
Yeah,
But if you're passed out because you don't have oxygen, how can you save your kid? So
exactly.
I always come back and I try to think about that in business. Yeah, hustle culture is glamorized right now, but it's not good for you. And you need to take that
No,
time off and recalibrate.
right.
Which actually leads me back to the community part that you were talking about
Sure.
early, because community is not just a nice thing to have. It really is a core infrastructure for a founder and a company because it's not just a support system, it's the reminders of, hey, did you eat today? Things
Yeah,
like that. And
and you can look at community in different ways. On the social spectrum of things, it's literally accountability buddies, right? Body doubling so that you're working next to each other and it just feels nicer. I don't know why, but
yeah.
it does. But community as an infrastructure for business, it's really just focusing on serving your customer, addressing their needs, listening to them, and making a space for them to connect with each other. And then they help you create, sell, and scale, right? And
Mhm.
so that's the magic on the community side for business. But on the personal side, it is also what you're saying. I had this wonderful brunch a couple weeks back here in San Diego. It was a women in venture capital brunch. And it was so nice to get
Mhm.
together and talk about what's happening, not just in business, but
Yeah.
in our personal lives as women, what we're going through from a health perspective to life milestones. And it's so nice to just, again, touch base with the fact that we are human and
Mhm.
that there are people who are going through things as well. Because when we're working and working, we assume everyone else is maybe doing better because we look at their Instagram reels or
Yes.
whatever. And we all post the best stuff,
Yeah.
right? We're not posting, I'm dying and can't get out of bed. It's, you're like, no, I cannot put that online. And I think we do have to be more honest about being human.
Mhm.
But there is the level of privacy, there's trust again, and all of that. So, at least making sure that we have community for ourselves as humans and community as a focus in business as a differentiator to make
Mhm.
money.
I
There's
love
both
that.
sides of the coin. And I guess that's why I love community. It
Mhm.
just flows both in my life and work side. And I just feel that, look, if I help you be more successful, I'm going to be more successful and we're
Yeah.
all going to be more successful. And that's
Yep.
that's the approach. But it's
Mhm.
not everyone, right? Some people are not community people and that's okay. They're not my people. But some people believe in a zero sum game, right? Where it's either me or you. And for those of us who are more community driven, we'll absolutely jump in and say, hey, I'll help you when you're in need. And it's not, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. That's less of a community, than anything else. That's more of that zero sum, like you have
Yeah.
to give and get equally. But in a community, it's like you put into it and it returns tenfold, but not necessarily an eye for an eye, more like they always say it takes a village to raise a child, and
Yeah.
it takes a village to raise a business. It takes a village to raise you as an
Yes.
adult. I think it's really important to think about community across the board.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's just a much nicer place to exist in, I think. But
Absolutely.
what kind of advice would you give to founders who are trying to build that community?
Yeah, this is a great question. And it's a bit of an art and a science
Okay.
because to me, it's so much about authenticity and
Hmm.
coming back to what works for you. Definitely building a space Because for me, when I think of community driven companies, it's not actually building the communities themselves, but actually creating space for existing communities. The folks that have issues with X thing or Y thing, there are existing communities, you're just creating a space for them. And how you do that can be so different for different folks. If you're in Latin America, that's probably WhatsApp, because
Mhm.
culturally that's what everyone is using. But depending on who you are and what you're about, it might be a podcast that has some group associated. It could be a newsletter. It could be your social presence on LinkedIn or
Mhm.
X. And it's not the thing you do, it's how you do it, and enabling engagement in some way, shape, or form. So again, you don't become the bottleneck and you're just creating a space where you're bringing people together and we're all helping each other. So the ways that I've done it, and I always share how I do things because I've learned so many things along the way, and it's always a work in progress. But say having a newsletter that's consistently providing value, doing what it says it's going to do. I think, and actually, even just to take a step back, talking the talk and walking the walk consistently is at the core of building good relationships
Yeah.
and community, right? That builds trust, the consistency. And so, where do you show it when you want to scale that? Again, platform of your choice,
Mhm.
and thinking of, there's even platforms that are created to host your community, to have
Yeah.
resources, to have the people engage, or it could be more indirect, or it could be, now everyone really loves going back to in-person events. So maybe
Yeah.
your community is just your local community, or you're creating conferences, or you're creating community at conferences. So for example, every time I go to speak at any conference, I will say, there's some exceptions, but typically I will have these open office hours, Ganas coffees that I'll host,
Hmm.
where I invite founders, investors, and ecosystem builders and friends to just come in, and we'll have an informal conversation. And every single group will be its own dynamic depending on
Mhm.
how big the size of the group is and who's there. And the goal is always enabling value,
Mhm.
always give first, and always starting hitting it off with in communicating the vision, the mission, the values in some way, shape, or form. It's not like you're reading off it like, this is our vision for this meeting or whatever, but more like it's part of the event description or the community you start building, where it's like, this is open, we're here to connect, and it's informal. Like, we're all looking to support each other and each other's journeys of success in whatever journey we're in. And that's exactly what carries through in all of our events.
Yeah.
In our online and offline events, we have an office hours for investor series, an office hours for founder series. And the
Nice.
people who join, they know we're here to help each other. And that's the vibe. Those are the values. Pay it forward, support each other, and share what you've learned. And so it's like, what vibe are you giving? So I actually wrote a community playbook at some point, maybe 5, 6, 7, maybe, I don't know how many
Mhm.
years ago, but it still holds. And it's so much about defining for who you are, what that vision, mission, values are. And every company has it, whether you articulate it or not, the
Mhm.
different thing. And that will help you shape everything that you do, the content, the events, the marketing, the products, right? The
Yeah.
solutions that you're actually bringing. Because at the end of the day, people are looking to build community, to have problems solved, to feel human, to feel connection, to be aligned. And in order to do it, again, it's just walking the walk and talking the talk consistently. And you have to choose your own adventure in terms of how you do that.
Yeah. I love that. It's like those small decisions and habits really do compound over time, and it makes a big difference. But you have to do things the right way, put your humanity first, and remember that your customers are human, and it's just
Yeah.
doing everything the right way. And that does pay off over time, even though it feels like you're moving much slower, maybe.
Sometimes, yeah, but that's the thing. So, one thing that I see sometimes folks do when they think of community, it's putting all this money into it. But it's not about that. It's really like, how do we make this a win-win?
Yeah.
So, for example, my in person meetings, I've met founders that I've invested in. I've met investors in my fund. I've met ecosystem builders that I collaborate with. And so there's a win 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 situation. It's not just, we're going to make this event. And sometimes people make it about how fancy it is, or where it is, or what, how much you spend and the meals. It's not about that. It's literally just creating value for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think what's missing also is that it's okay to say, hey, The reason I'm coming here is I want to build community and support everyone, but also I need your help. And so
Yeah.
oftentimes, actually, when I do these events, I usually ask, what's your superpower? How can you help everyone in this room? What kind of expertise do you have that you can share? And what do you need help with? And just to make it more normalized to say, hey, here's what I can give, and here's what I'm looking for, and maybe someone can help me. And when you approach it that way, it's not icky. It's not like
Yeah.
I'm going to network to get something out of people. It's literally give and take. And it feels so beautiful to
Mhm.
feel, at least to me. I love it when there's this exchange of value, whether it's even just learning or maybe just someone who's listening to you, because the entrepreneur journey, it can be so tough
Mhm.
and so lonely. So it's just, yeah, I just keep going about community. But again, art and science, the importance is being authentic, really
Yeah.
being able to communicate what you're about and doing it consistently and always running it through the filter of how is this a win-win? How
Yeah.
is this going to help? If you're doing it for business, how is this going to help business? And if it's not, then try a different way so
I
that
love
you
that.
are creating value, but you're also getting value yourself.
Yeah. I love that. For those who want to read your book, What Actually Matters, if they had one lesson to remember from that book, what do you hope that stays with them?
It's not you. It's the system. And the system didn't teach us all these things, and it's not made to teach us all these things. I think I'd bring it back to the access tax, that it often costs us more equity, more energy, more emotional turmoil because we're unaware of things that we were not taught and that the
Mhm.
system's not set up to teach us.
Yeah.
And so we will all mess up, we will all get no's, but know that for some of us, the game wasn't exactly set for us to win. And so we need to help each other and be okay with the humility and figure out how to get that orientation, that map. I do my best to share the one that I have found, the one that's gotten me to where I am, but certainly just starting that notion of what if it wasn't you? What if it was the system? And what could help you learn more about what you don't know and figure out what questions to ask and how to think about things instead
Mhm.
of just being distracted by all the shiny objects that we always have around, which is
Yeah.
so easy to fall into the trap of.
Yeah. Has writing the book changed the way you think about your own work as an investor?
Yeah, it's actually changed the way I think about all of them because I have
Mm.
never sat down to communicate, codify, share examples and frameworks to use in all these different aspects and in all these different roles.
Yeah.
And I was reading a proof of my own book the other day because, as it turns out, when you are an author, you have to do all these proofs and all that, and you have to reread your book so many times. But I read through it and I remember telling my husband, this is so good. I need to take my own advice.
Awesome.
I think like what I've learned is sometimes because we're so much in the weeds of things, we don't realize how much we know and how much we've learned. And sometimes how we have to remember to actually leverage the things that we've learned. But I feel like everyone who's been in doing whatever they're doing, whether it's a book or not, just sitting down and writing things, it's so eye-opening, so humbling, but also it makes you feel good because you're like,
Yeah.
wow, I've actually learned a lot and I have a lot to share and it
Yeah.
feels good. But it also points out, yeah, I believe that and I say that to others, but why am I still a work in progress in that area? That's all part of the mix. So being human
I
again.
love that. I love that. Thank you, Lolita, for joining us today. I've learned so much about how investors and founders, they're not competing. I often think of founders having to fight to get the money or fight with investors, but it's not the case at all. And I think you've laid out a very practical way of looking at
Yes.
things and operating and doing things. And I really appreciate how you explained it's not necessarily the founder's fault. It's just the system that they're doing and how community can be so important. And it's just, you had so many good things to say today. I know our audience are going to come away
Oh, I
with
love
so
that.
many things.
I'm
So,
glad it's meant to be practical, right? And if you only knew then you could be like, oh, it's not me, it's them. Or maybe it is you and you're like, oh, okay, I need to
Yeah.
work on that.
But
Because,
that's good
yeah.
information. It's not that you failed, it's just it's another data point and you gotta
But you know what? Actually, I think that's one thing that I would say is that at the end of the day, we all make mistakes, we all fail. But if we're not making mistakes and we're not failing, we're not growing, we're not learning. And that's exactly how we actually develop all of our differentiation, our views, our strongly held beliefs or loosely held strong beliefs. That's the thing. And then you're able to work better and feel better about what you're going through and normalize this to say, yeah, I don't know everything. We're always learning. Nobody knows it all.
Right.
Everyone's always learning more. But it is true. Some of us have been doing certain things for a longer time, so maybe we have a perspective. But you know what? Also, the last thing I will say is that no matter what you hear, what you learn, which I think something that I constantly find myself reminding people and I find to be really important is to take what makes sense to you and drop everything else.
Oh,
Just
wow.
that simple.
I love that. And then be authentic and do things the right way. I love it.
Yeah,
Such good
yeah.
advice.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for having me. I
Oh,
loved our conversation. It was really fun.
me too. It was so good, and I learned a lot. For those of you who would like to pre-order Lolita's book, What Actually Matters, I'll put the link in the description. The book comes out September 15th and will also be available on Amazon if you want to pre-order it there. And if you'd like to learn more about Ganas Ventures, you can visit their website at ganas.vc. Keeping you connected to tomorrow. Today, this is Alicia with AInews.com.